Good morning. Pasuk Yud. Pasuk goes like this. Ki tavo chokhma belibecha vedat lenafshecha yanem mizimat tishmor alecha page 62. Tivuna tinersecha leatzlecha miderech ra meish medaber tafuchot haozvim archot yosher lalecha bederchei choshech. Okay, hasmechim la'asot ra yigilu betapuchot ra. Let's read this in English. When wisdom enters your heart and knowledge will be pleased with your soul, design will protect you, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu, discern will safeguard you, to rescue you from the way of evil, from a person who speaks duplicities, from those who forsake paths of uprightness. Very interesting English right here, no? To walk in roads of darkness. Okay, let's continue. Let's explain this step by step with normal explanation. Earlier, in the earlier Pesukim, Shlomo Melech really spoke about a person seeking wisdom, and we discussed that wisdom is Torah is compared to silver, not gold. Why is Torah compared to silver? Because silver you always have to polish. Gold you don't always have to polish. The same way with your Torah, you always have to polish your Torah to always make it better and better and better. But now he describes what happens when this Torah, which is this treasure, is found when wisdom enters within. It's a shift from an external effort that we were talking about from before, externally to always try to grab more Torah, to more of an internal transformation within yourself, within your neshama. At first, Torah becomes something you study, right, to grab knowledge. Then it becomes something you feel, right? That study becomes a feeling within yourself, and eventually becomes something who you are. I am a ben Torah, right? I'm not just learning Torah. I became a ben Torah. Now, when Chokhmah really enters your heart, it no longer really requires constant reminding or external enforcement, because it becomes your natural instinct. And I'll give you an example. You wake up in the morning, you go straight to do Netilah. That became an instinct within yourself, right? You know it's Shabbat, so I won't touch the light, I won't touch the phone. That's an instinct. But again, from the beginning, you needed to learn that it's a sort to do that, right? So that really it shapes your choices, it shapes your reactions, it shapes your relationships, because you won't go out with someone who's not on your religious level. Because now I'm now I'm on this level. You won't go out with someone who's not Shomer Shabbat, because I'm Shomer Shabbat, right? That just becomes who you are, and that's really the stage of this integration with your Chokhmah. That Torah is not just in your mind, but it's in your bloodstream. It becomes who you are. Now, the continuing with the words, V'dad lenafshecha yinaem, knowledge will be sweet to your soul. At first, learning can be like discipline. What happens? You push yourself to focus, to understand, to grow. But then when Torah truly enters the lev, the heart, it becomes something pleasant. You have this in Yeshiva a lot. It's hard to learn in the beginning, but then later on, it'll become something sweet to you. I'm sure you had this in your life. In the beginning, it was hard to start learning, but once you actually started the Gemara, you started learning, Mishlei, like Rabbi Aaron was telling us. When you started learning the Mishlei, you started feeling it. You begin to crave the Torah, not out of duty, but out of delight. Right, in the beginning, we look at it as a duty, but now it's more of a delight. And your neshama really finds, sweetness in this emet, peace in the honesty, beauty in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's wisdom, because this is exactly what Chazal were telling us, that taste and see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good. Because the more you live by the Torah, the more your neshama tastes its sweetness. And when Torah really becomes your inner song, every mitzvah, every insight, every small act of growth really becomes, like he says here, yin'at lenafshecha, a pleasure to your soul. It's not a burden, because you start loving what you're doing. You start loving Shabbat. I was giving a class to completely secular people who don't keep Shabbat. And the guy was telling me, he's like, I kept one Shabbat, and it really felt like the best thing in the world, because I actually started experiencing what life is all about. What does that mean? You stop in the middle of the week, at the end of the week, you pause, and you just reflect on the past week. You have a break from society. You have a break from everything. People say, Thanksgiving, they have once a year Thanksgiving. We literally have it once a week. You're sitting with your family every single week. If not my house, you're sitting by, every time excuses, you have to go to my parents, whatever. And then continuing on, Mezimat tishmor alecha, discretion will guard you, saying once this wisdom fills your live, it starts to protect you. Through clarity, you start understanding life with clarity. Mezima means foresight. Discernment means the ability to see consequences before they happen. It's actually one of the 7 habits of Highly Effective People by what's his name, by Stephen Covey. He says, begin with the end in mind. That's one of these ideas that when Torah lives inside of you, it becomes like a spiritual immune system, because you begin to sense, moral clarity, emotional clarity, spiritual clarity before it even strikes. Because this is wrong for me, I won't do it. This is right for me, I will do it. It's good to wake up X amount of time earlier to come to the knis to start learning. I won't go here because it's not good for me. But you even think about it before. I had this guy I was learning with, and he was telling me that he's just started keeping kosher. And we were slowly, he wasn't keeping kosher before we started. I explained to him how important kosher is, this, that. And he was telling me, he's like, Rabbi, I'm going on vacation now with my wife, and my wife has a hard time with keeping kosher. I'm like, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to Miami. I'm like, bro. like everything there is top. So we sat there, and we literally made reservations for the whole week for every single restaurant. I'm like, now you put yourself a fence, so you can't even get there. You won't even have the hava amin, as the Gemara says. You won't even have the thought to go somewhere, because you have Fuego Monday. It's free advertising. You have tapas on Tuesday. You have, every single day you have a different place to go to, right? But you thought about it from before. Right. He had the moral clarity to think about it before. I don't want to have the thought to even go there, so I made reservations before. That's the wisdom. It teaches you to see through all this stuff. To recognize when something looks tempting, but really, it's poison underneath. Rabbi Nachman says this all the time. He says this. A person could build his life. For years, it could take him to build his life, but it could take him a second to destroy the life. Think about anything. You build your name, Tov Shemi Shem and Tov. You build your name forever. In the community? What is a good name? Is the highest thing. You have a good name. You have a good name. What happens? A person does a wrong business deal, messes up here and there. Boom, his name is like this. No one wants to do business with him. But it took him 20 years to build his name. It took him a second to destroy his name. Let's continue. I'm sorry. Tevuna. When you're talking about tevuna, your understanding will protect you. You're saying tevuna is deeper than knowledge. Why? It's the ability really to apply wisdom correctly. It's what tells you not only what's right, but also when and how to do it. What's an example of this? When to speak and when to be quiet. Right? That's the wisdom, is to understand. When should I speak? Classic. They have a video. One not to say at a shiva house. You have a guy who goes, he starts saying stupid things, so he just doesn't know what to say. So he just makes it awkward. So he says weird things. If you had chokhmah, you think about, I probably shouldn't say this here. Maybe I should say this. When to another example is when to show, strength and when to show compassion. It's also, you have to, a parent has this all the time. My son runs into my room every single night, and he's like, I want to sleep on your bed. I'm like, dude, go to your bed. I'm not letting you sleep in my bed. He's like, no, I want to sleep in your bed. I'm like, I'm not letting you sleep in my bed. But again, how do you do that? Because again, I love my kid and I love holding him next to me. But again, I have to show him some sort of discipline, boundaries. You can't just walk into my room in the middle of the night. You want to sleep with his dad, when that's an idea, when to give and when to hold back from that. But without tevuna, even the good intentions can cause harm, because when understanding, guards you, your actions become balanced and they become timely and they become wise. And this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's promise. When Torah fills your heart, your very judgment becomes protected. And continuing on, the pasuk says, "You save you from the way of evil." Shlomo really describes now the purpose of this inner protection that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us. Why are you laughing?
No, I was just thinking that's all big.
He probably doesn't want to share now. He says it saves you from the paths that lead you to ruin your neshama. And he says that the wording here, it says miderech ra, not from a single bad act, but from a path of bad. Now, because the spiritual decline rarely happens in one moment, like we were talking about last week. It starts with one step. You do one wrong thing, he's still laughing. It's a compromise. You do a compromise, it's fine. Everyone goes here, I could go here also. Everyone, how many people pray minyan? It's fine if I pray at home. It's not a big deal. That's when it starts. Torah, inside your neshama keeps you sensitive to to make these decisions in the beginning. Still laughing. It tells you this. Tevuna tells you this is not who you really are, and this is who you really want to be. And continuing on, one of the greatest protections is really the corrupt influence that we have from around us. There are people who use cleverness to twist truth. Who justify immorality, who manipulate ideas, who mock holiness, right? But Shlomo calls here. He says, "Medaber Tapuchot, which means people who invert values. You know, in every generation, the challenge really reappears. You know, you'll have people who glamorize this rebellion, the leftist movement. You know, mock purity, the leftist movement. You know, and call darkness light. But you have this. You know, if you don't respect, I'm not going to say this. It's on recording. You know, well, without Torah, you know, your mind easily slips away from these things, and it gets swept away by the societies around us. But when wisdom fills your heart, your neshama really feels, can tell the falseness around you. You can see what's garbage and what's not, and you can hear when words are off, and when freedom isn't just a disguise for slavery. The world is all about freedom, freedom, freedom. They're really slaves to what they call freedom. And true wisdom really grants you this moral radar. And Bezrat Hashem, you know, when you understand all these things, you know, it brings that once Torah enters your heart, it brings the sweetness to your neshama. It gives you foresight to avoid avoid harm, and it protects you from this deception of the world, and it keeps your path yashar, your straight, and your joy pure, because the world outside is really full of noise. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed within you this compass that really always points to the correct light, which that's the Torah. When the Torah fills your neshama and your heart, you know, you carry the compass with you wherever you go to always find the correct way. And Bezrat Hashem will continue tomorrow. Have a great day.